Hi there, Catherine. So let's take a look at what you've sent us in this particular set of essays. Let's see. Democracy is under its biggest threat. Let's see. Let's see what you wrote. Okay. These years, a topic regarding democracy has been widely discussed. Some experts argue that the freedom of the country is undergoing the menace from the beginning, whereas other professionals hold different view that the voter failed to manage the authorities because of financial market. Internationally, I personally support the former statement. In the following essay, I will provide possible reasons and example to elaborate on my own point of view. Now, as you can see, my computer has actually gone ahead and suggested some changes. But apart from that, I do see some awkwardness in some of the language and some of the grammar, some of the vocabulary, but I kind of pinpoint grammar as being an issue here. So I want to look at it again, starting from the beginning. First of all, these years is really a rather awkward expression. It's not something we use. We prefer to say something like nowadays, okay? Or recently, or in recent years. That would have been a great way to say this. So why don't we try that? In recent years, a topic regarding democracy has been widely discussed. Some experts argue that the freedom of the country, this doesn't make sense, is undergoing the menace. First of all, the implies that there is only one menace, and that's clearly not the case. There are many potential menaces to any country. So it's not the right word, and it's not the right way to express this. You could have used threat. I know you're trying to find kind of alternative vocabulary, and that's great. You should. But sometimes the vocabulary used is really just the best word, actually, that you could possibly say here. So why don't we try it? Some experts argue that the freedom of the country is undergoing a great threat. Get rid of this from the beginning. Whereas others, I don't know why you would talk about professionals, whereas others hold a different view that the voters have failed to control authorities because of, it's not just the financial market, but it's the influence of financial markets internationally. So I didn't change the structure of your sentence, but I did change some of what you were actually saying. I personally support the former statement. In the following essay, I'll provide possible reasons and examples with an S. Okay? So those changes need to be made. One of the reasons why democracy is still facing its greatest danger is the instability of the government and also the external pressure from other countries. Okay, explain that to me. What do you mean? Don't just go into another reason. Before you go into another reason, explain to me what it is you're talking about. So, let's pretend you did. Another factor is that some parts of the rights are still controlled by the original form of the institution. I don't understand that. Take, for example, no, get rid of take. So, for example, comma, Hong Kong has its own form of regime. However, there are parts of the decisions which are associated with human rights and international events which are limited and generated by mainland China, full stop. In fact, owing to the influence of political events and invasion from other parties, i.e., the democracy of this country is not solid and strong enough to something. You need a verb to stand against, to withstand another regime. I'm not really sure what you're trying to say. Ultimately, nations still experience, that's the wrong word here. I think you mean perilous, perilous, okay, situations nowadays. So there's a variety of different things happening here. You've got the right general idea, but some problems with vocabulary, some problems with grammar are keeping this from being a really well-structured, strong paragraph, okay? Let's move on. We don't say on the other side, we say on the other hand. However, you cannot use the expression on the other hand if you have not used in your first paragraph on the one hand. You see, these are expressions that go together. So here you would have needed to say on the one hand, and then here you would have said on the other hand. Since you didn't do that, you can't really use on the other side or on the other hand. What you can do, though, is you can use other expressions that show contrast, that show, you know, some sort of shift in your perspective. There are a lot of them. So why don't we try one? Something like simply in contrast, okay? So in contrast, the element as to why citizens cannot command the authorities is because of the business transactions global. Ooh, what's going on here with the grammar? You lost me. Let me try it one more time. I'm not going to correct anything. I'm just going to read it through. So, the element why citizens cannot command the authorities because of the business transactions globally is that democratic institutions' lack of transparency and accountability in government. All right, you've got a lot of ideas happening here, but unfortunately they don't all fit into one sentence so neatly. Let's see. I'm going to try to see if I can rewrite this for you, okay? Give me a minute. Let me think about it a little bit. So, in contrast, the reason why citizens cannot command the authorities is all right. The reason why citizens cannot command the authorities is because business transactions. No, I can't do it like this. You've got so many different ideas here. Look what's happening. You say, first of all, citizens cannot command the authorities. You've got business transactions happening globally. And then you've got democratic institutions lack transparency and accountability. Full stop. So you've got several different reasons. So it's very difficult for me to say that the reason why something is happening is because X, because Y, because Z. It's very complicated to write this. So I'm going to ask you to rewrite it on your own. Another reason is that the economic market across the globe is too huge to control. For example, this is not a full sentence. For instance, Greek bankruptcy problem. Greek bankruptcy problem, what? Tell me what the Greek bankruptcy problem is. By the way, Greece is not bankrupt. I can tell you that firsthand. Okay. For instance, something. Full sentence, though, with a subject, with a verb, and with an object. The authority of Greece tried to avoid, careful, it's not corruption when you are bankrupt. It could just be because of, miscalculation, because of whatever. But corruption and bankruptcy are not synonyms, so be careful, okay? Greece tried to avoid a Eurozone collapse. However, the democracies are trapped by financial systems and the vulnerability of the government. Thus, this situation contributed to the severe problem several years ago. What are you telling me, Katherine? I'm not clear about what your message is. Remember, it was democracy is being threatened because it's the markets that control the government, not the people. So, the fact is that this is a rather complicated topic to talk about and to write about, okay? However, it seemed here in your introduction that you understood the topic, and you were essentially saying that, yes, democracy is undergoing a large threat because of capital markets. This is what you said was your position in the beginning. But if you look at how you develop your topics, this idea is not clear. It kind of feels like you go from one point to another without any clear sort of central idea. So here you said that there is external pressure from other countries. Then you said that there was some vocabulary problems, so I just didn't really understand what you were saying. Okay. And then you said that, for example, Hong Kong is controlled by China, and then there are political events from other parties, but there's nothing about global capital markets. There's nothing about these. I mean, it's not global. It's kind of, it sounds like regional, local, and it's not like democracy is under threat. So you didn't really convince us with your arguments about what you said you were going to talk about. Then, here, again, I mean, there's not really a lot about global capital markets. You talked about a lack of transparency. You talked about a lack of accountability. You used Greece as an example, but the way you used Greece didn't really convince us. You didn't say that, how can I say this? That, you know, it was the global capital markets that undermined Greece's democracy. That's what you were supposed to focus on here. So I'm not locating a central idea anywhere in this essay, okay? And you know, as an examiner, I would mark it down for task achievement. You haven't convinced me of anything that you said you were going to convince me of. So let's move on. In conclusion, I believe that if the democratic form of government can be established at the initial stage and also take the opinion of, well, it's not really nationals, but it's of citizens into consideration, the consequences can then lead to a different future for both democratic government and inhabitants. Okay, look, this is a really difficult topic. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not an easy topic, but it could potentially be a topic that you might get on your exam. And you need to be able to have a clear opinion and be able to carry that opinion throughout the essay. I did not see that anywhere. I did not see a clear understanding of the task. I did not see a clear kind of development of the issue. Like I said, again, it's not easy, but you didn't convince me throughout the essay of an understanding of this. You kind of just, it wasn't really particularly structured or convincing in any particular part. So it had some issues, Katherine, really. All right. So why don't we take a look at what else you have for us? Okay, so here we've got one of those mixed type task ones where you've got two pie charts and you've got a stacked bar chart. So it's really rather complex. Let's see what you wrote here. All right, I'm missing something. What's happening? Okay. The pie charts compare the number. It's not the number. It's actually percentages or proportion. The best word here you could use is proportion rather than percentage. So the pie charts compare the proportion of automobile ownership in England and Scotland in 1995, while the bar chart illustrates the figure of sales volume, okay, of VW holders in an 8-year period. Fine. Overall, the pie charts showed the largest number of car driver purchased their car in both England and Scotland, whereas the smallest amount of automobile holders shared their car in England and leased automobile in Scotland. In contrast, the bar chart revealed car sales volume of VW drivers experienced a remarkable variation from 1990 to 1998. Okay, you were definitely on the right track here. You did focus on some important information, but some of the expression was really rather awkward, so I want to fix it. Here, let's start with the first part. The pie charts show the largest number of car drivers, purchased their cars. That's what you're focusing on. Let's see if what you said is actually accurate. We're talking about, here we go. All right, so bought is purple, bought is blue. So it's not really true here because in England, an equal proportion of people bought and leased their cars, whereas in Scotland, the majority, the vast majority, purchased their cars, okay? So right away, we could see there is some inaccuracy. You did not account for this fact that you've got an equal proportion of people both buying and leasing cars in England. You've got to mention that, all right? Otherwise, you're really painting an inaccurate picture here of this chart. Okay, so overall the pie charts show that the largest proportion of car drivers purchased their car in Scotland, and in England an equal proportion purchased and leased. Okay, whereas the smallest proportion or figure of automobile drivers, because not holders, shared their cars. Okay, so you've got to change this whole thing. You've got to change it. Okay, and then you're not really talking, yeah, I guess you could say variation. I'm going to let you get away with it. It's fine. So looking first at the pie charts, the highest share of cars purchased in England made up half, I don't know what you're talking about here. The highest share of car purchase in England made up half of the total car ownership, whilst there were over 2/3 of citizens bought the vehicle in Scotland. This does not make sense grammatically, and I don't understand what you're trying to tell me. If I didn't have the charts in front of me, I could not understand the meaning. This is something I want you to understand. I have to be able to understand what you're talking about without looking at the image. Okay? So, can you explain what you're looking at without me looking at it with you? So, how could you have said this? All right. You can't say the highest share because we already established before that the proportion of owned cars and leased cars in England were equal. They were, I can't see what the number is. I can't really see. I think it says 35%, which doesn't make sense. It has to be more. At least this has to be 30%. So yeah, all right, fine. Let's say it's 35, and this is 30%. Fine. But you have to say that an equal proportion in England bought and leased cars. The remaining proportion shared their cars. Okay? Let's see. Whilst there were over 2/3 of, no, the grammar is wrong here. So, whilst in Scotland, over 2/3 of citizens owned their vehicles. Next, the number. We're never talking about numbers here. We're talking about proportions. So, the figure of English citizens who rented their car accounted for 35%, and Scottish inhabitants, I don't know what that's talking about. I mean, I understand that when you saw shared, you assumed carpool. But it's not really clear to me that that's what they mean. I mean, shared. Shared could mean a lot of things, that they share it with their partner. you know, that they share it with like someone they live with. So it's not necessarily a carpool. Do you understand how that's different? So you don't want to make assumptions about the information you're seeing that aren't there. I know it's tricky. I get it. So let's take a look. Lastly, the same percentage was recorded in shared cars in England and leased. All right. Honestly, just get rid of this. You're writing a lot of stuff that you didn't need to. You've got a really very simple pie chart here. Let's just look at it. So, simply, in England, an equal proportion of people owned and shared vehicles at approximately 35%. The remaining percentage of people in England, did I say shared? I meant leased, forgive me. The remaining percentage of people in England share their cars. In contrast, the vast majority of people in Scotland owned their own cars, and a similar proportion of Scottish people leased and shared a car at roughly 20 and 15% respectively. You're done. That's it. That's all you have to say. Then move on to the VW owners, because after all of this time, you haven't even talked about them. So you've got this tiny little paragraph about the stacked bar chart, whereas this is really where you should have focused more of your information. Here's what you said. Moving on to the bar chart, we can see that there were around 280,000 sales in 1990. The figure decreased to just below 240,000 and then saw a slight variation in the next 4 years. Moreover, the sales volume reached the lowest share under 200,000 before reaching a plateau of 290. How does that happen? You reach this, and then in 1997, you like increase almost 1/3 higher? I don't understand that. In the following years, the sales number declined to, okay. So we're absolutely missing a ton of information here. You spent so much time on these pie charts that you did not spend enough time on the bar chart. Let's talk about this. So, first of all, yes, did you have to talk about the total number of sales of VW cars? 100%. You needed to say that in the beginning of 1990, it was just under 300,000. All right, it then fell dramatically to under 240,000, where it remained for the next 6 years. In 1997, the total figure increased to just below 300,000, and in 1998, it was at whatever that number is. I don't know. What is it? Like 280,000, 290,000, or yeah, 280,000 or so. All right, done. That's the total number. Then you have to go into the specifics of the VW owners. Predominantly, Scotland made up the lion's share of this figure, with figures in Scotland varying between 160,000 and 200,000. England's sales were accounted for a low of 30,000 in 1995, and as much as a high of, figure out what this number is, I can't right now, and tell me what that number is. So just say that England in you and say what year it was. So in 1995, you had this tiny share for England. In 1997, you had this huge share for England, and you're done. Make sure you're focusing on the important things here, not the things that aren't important, okay? All right, so a lot of information here. I hope it helps. Let's see another set of essays from you. Good luck.